Okay, so here is the midterm requirements. You're going to, inside of your main program, create a 3-element string, and we want to name it, identify it as user properties. So an array type that's going to hold data types of string, and it's going to be ID'd as user properties. There's going to be 3 spots in there, 3 elements in there eventually. Then you're going to create a read line state, or actually a write line. You want to, when you're creating prompts for your user, those will always be write line statements, right? That's text you want to display to the screen. So we'll first have the prompt for the user that we want them to enter their first name, but then in order to get their first name, then we have to actually use the read line method of the console object. And will that take the value from the user and assign it into the first element of our user properties array. So you hopefully start thinking to yourselves, well, okay, I've got this array user properties. It's got string values. There's 3 elements. If I want to target the first one, let's see, that should be user properties in square brackets. What number? What's the first element in all arrays? What's the number assigned to the first element in all arrays? Not the actual data value, but what element number is the first element in all arrays?
0.
Yes, very good. Arrays are 0-based, meaning that the first element is always going to be element 0, and then the next one is element 1, and then element 2, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to keep that in mind when we're looking at the instructions here, because that's what we're actually asking you to do as the programmer, is to take your user properties array and assign the input from the user to that first element. Then you'll create another prompt, so console write line, where you're going to ask for the user to enter their phone number. Then again, we'll have a read line statement. This time, you're going to assign the user input to the second element in your user properties array. And then a third prompt. This is again a console.writeLine statement. Now you're going to prompt the user to enter their email address. And so then you use a read line statement that'll take their input and assign that to the third element in your user properties array. So you've got an array, has 3 elements, and you've set it up so the user can type in 3 different values, and you have them stored in elements 0, 1, and 2 within your array. So now that you have all that input from the user, we're going to generate some output. So you'll use a console.writeLine statement where you're going to start with the text string value hello. And notice I put a space in there because we're going to follow that up with hello, and then whatever they typed in as their first name wants to follow that. And then we'll add some additional text that reads, well, your phone number is, and again a space, and then again the value that they typed in for the second element. And then lastly, we'll have a string value that has the comma after their phone number, space, and your email address is space, and then display the value for the third element in that array. So if I typed in there Bill for first name and 123 for my phone number and ABC for my email address, it should say hello space Bill, comma, your phone number is space 123, comma, space, and your email address is space ABC. That would be the final output. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. I need to come here and close up my open solution here. So let me move my Visual Studio back into your view. Okay, so we need to obviously create a new project here. It's going to be C# console app .NET Core type. Click next. Then we're going to call this one midterm. Midterm assignment is fine too. I'm not really particular about the name. Should have the word midterm in there somewhere, I would assume. And so the project name, solution name are going to be the same. We're only creating one project here, so that's fine. So we'll click create. And so here we are with our new project. So the first step in the instructions then is that we want to go ahead and declare a 3-element string named, or 3-element array, I should say, of string type, and name it user properties. So how do we go about doing that? Any thoughts? Well, to declare our array, we need to first identify the type that's going to be.
Which is a string.
Which is a string. So that's what I type in, string, to indicate the type. And then I follow it up with the square brackets, because what I'm really saying is this new variable is going to contain strings, but it's an array structure that's going to contain strings. So that's really telling it 2 pieces of information. We want to create a new array here, and that new array is going to have strings in it. That's the data type we want to store in there. Then we need to assign a name to it. My array works fine. Actually, I think yeah, I did give you a name, so I'm sorry. So that should be user properties. And just typing it in camel case, lowercase u, capital P. So that is the initial portion here, right? We're saying create an array of string type, call it user properties. But then we have to do the actual assignment of new string array, and then put a 3 inside of there. So the left-hand side of the assignment operator is where we're identifying that it's going to be we're going to create a new array. It's going to be an array that holds strings. We're going to call it, refer to it as user properties. And then over here now, we're actually initializing, well, we are initializing it, because we give it a value here of 3. And if you were to look at that, if you were to debug at this point, you would see that there would be 3 elements in your new array called user properties. And by default, what the compiler does is just assign the 0 as the value for each of those elements. So initially, we don't have anything that we've assigned into it, but the default of the compiler for C# is to put zeros in. If we declare, when we're declaring our array, if we also tell it how many elements we're going to have in there. Does that make sense so far?
Yep.
Yes.
Let's save our work as we go. Control S.
I do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you comment this line?
How do I comment? A couple of possibilities here. You can use 2 forward slashes. That's what we call a single line comment. So this creates a 3-element array of strings, or string type. Okay, now as soon as I hit the enter key, now I'm back into coding mode. So that's why it's called a single line comment. You can do a multi-line comment by doing a forward slash and then follow it up with an asterisk. That's the opening character or the sequence. And then the closing is a asterisk forward slash. So just the reverse of the opener. So we begin the comment with a forward slash asterisk, and we close the multi-line comment with the asterisk forward slash. So that means now if I press enter here, it's still a comment. In fact, it adds these little asterisks in there. This is something new they actually just added in 2019. Those don't have to be there. The key is that you have the forward slash asterisk at the beginning and the asterisk forward slash at the end. But as long as it's in green in your Visual Studio, then you're good. You're in comment mode. So if you actually didn't get it quite right and you do something like that, you know, you can see visually, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. That's in green. I know green is comments. So obviously that's not correct. And it is very highly advised that we do, you know, use comments in here. For several reasons. One is that you might
Forget what it's supposed to do.
yeah, you go back, you know, a month or 2 later and you go, what the heck was I doing here? And you can't remember. especially as you get older. And it might be that you're not the program, or you're not the programmer that has to update this program. Somebody else may have to update it at some point in time. Either you don't work there anymore, or you've handed it off to somebody else on the team. So that, again, is helpful for them to understand, well, why did they do this? So commenting is highly advised. And I'm one of the worst at it. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is an important concept.
Thank you.
All right, so we've done the first step there. We declared our 3-element string array, and we named it user properties. So now the next thing is we want to create a prompt to inform the user what type of information we want them to type in when we add the read line statement here. So all prompts, as I said, you always just use a console.writeLine or write. It depends on whether or not, when you're in the console, whether you want the user, as they type it in, if that text should be just to the right of your prompt, then I would just use console write. If I want the prompt and then what the user's typing in to be underneath of it, the line underneath of it, then use writeLine. So it's just a matter of, how you want it to look on your screen as far as the output's concerned. So writeLine gives you a line feed, whereas console.write does not give you the line feed. So I'll just use writeLine here. That'll work fine. So console writeLine, and then in the parentheses and inside of quotes, because it's a string output now that we're generating, we're going to type in there, enter first name, colon, and then I always add a space, a space there if I only use the write method. Because as soon as the user starts typing, it'll be exactly where the cursor left off in the console if you use console.write. With console.writeLine, I really don't need to have that space there, because I know it's going to drop down to the cursor will be dropped down to the next line, and that's where the user will actually be typing in their value. And that is a statement. We want to end it with a semicolon. All statements always end with semicolons. True in most languages. I'm trying to think of, I guess Python would be one that's an exception. So this is the prompt the user sees. So the next thing in is we want to go ahead and take input from the user, and then using that input, assign it into our array. And since this is the first value that we're getting from the user, we want to store it in the first element in our array.
Which is 0.
Which will be 0. Good. So, well, keep thinking there for me. What's the name of our array?
User property.
User properties. So that's how we want to reference it, right? By name, user properties. And then we just follow it up with the square bracket and then the index value that we want it to be assigned to. So as you said, that's the 0 index value. So we want to target that element, user properties. It's 0 element. And what we want to assign to it is the results of a console dot read line method. And so that'll then take the user input and assign it into our array user properties at the first element position. So that's your first prompt and your first input. Let's now move on to the second prompt and input. So the formatting here is going to be very similar for the next two, right? So console.write line in parentheses and in quotes. Now we're asking them to enter their phone number. And then we'll end the prompt statement with a semi. And now again, we want to take the user input and assign that into our user properties, but now at the second element, which is what number?
1.
Number 1, very good. And that'll just be equal to a, oops, what happened there? A console.read line like so. And then one more prompt and one more input. So the next console write line will be in parentheses and quotes, enter your email address. Again, that's a single statement. We end it with a semi, and now we'll take the user input and we'll add it at what element location?
2.
2. Excellent. Okay, so there we have it. We've declared the array, we've identified prompts for each of the inputs we want to take from the user, and we've taken each of the prompts or each of the inputs from the user and assigned them at each of the elements in that array. Then the final thing is we just want to now output that string that starts with hello, and then the first value that's stored there in our array, user's name, and then comma space, the text, your phone number is, and then that value, and then comma space, and then your email address is. Now, there are 3 ways to do this. And I believe up to this point, I've shown you all 3, but we'll go ahead and go through those again. And the main reason I want to show you 3 of them is because you should know how to do all 3 methods. There'll be times when only a concatenate will work for your needs. There might be times when the composite formatting is the only thing that will work for your needs. Or there might be times when string interpolation is the best choice. So those are the 3 different options. So I just want to make sure you're clear on all 3 options, and then also emphasize the fact that in modern programming, I would say 99.9% of your output statements where you're combining text and inputs from the user, that the string interpolation method is the preferred method now. That is the newer method. It's simpler to read. It's actually simpler to build. But I still see, because that only came out recently, a lot of my instructions throughout the tutorials in this class still use either the older method of concatenation or composite formatting. And like I said, you need to be familiar with those, because that may be the only thing that you can use to generate the correct output. But like I say, in most circumstances these days, you'll probably use string interpolation. So let's just do them all for you here. And I would recommend to you as the final result for your midterm that you're going to use the string interpolation. Well, I'll do that one last. So let's start with the concatenate method. That's the more difficult, older method. So it's console.writeLine still, that's the output is still the same as far as the object and the method. It's just how we write it out inside of the console write-line that's going to change. Okay, so there's a console.writeLine statement, and so inside the parentheses, this is now where I would, if I'm concatenating, put in the word hello space, because I want the space to be there before the next value shows up. And then we use the plus operator as the concatenate operator. So we're not doing addition here, right? We're not going to add the character HELLO to some other value. We're combining them as far as the string is concerned. And the next value I want to pull in here is a variable. And so I can't stick the variable, when we're concatenating anyway, we can't stick the variable inside of those quotes, because it wouldn't then read the variable properly. So the string values go in the quotes. We use the plus symbol then anytime we want to combine a variable value then into this string. And so in this case here, it's going to be the user properties position 0 that contains their name. And so that's the value that I would want to show right there. Then after that, we'll pick up on the string here. I want to have a comma after their first name. So I'll put the comma right at the beginning of this next string. And I made a mistake here. What's the mistake I made? Anybody pick it up?
You forgot the quote.
I forgot the concatenate operator. Right? We're concatenating. We're combining this now with more string text. So there we go. Open quote, comma. And this is going to be hello, and it's Bill, and then your phone number is, and then a space, and then close that quote. And now let's concatenate to it, our user properties at element 1. And then we want to concatenate to that the next bit of string, which will be a comma space, and then your email address is, and then space, and then quote, and then concatenate, and then again, user properties, and this is going to be the third element. Oops, square bracket. Okay, so that's concatenation then, taking string values, using the concatenate operator to add in their actual values that come from the variable. And you'll know that you do this correctly. Notice how the color code is changing in the IntelliSense here. So anything that's a string value is always in this kind of rusty color. And then if we've typed it out correctly, our variables should always show up in that light blue color. It matches what's up here and here for that matter. So that's visually, that's helpful to, if we see something like that, we know we got a problem there, because what it'll do is just type out that text, user properties, open square bracket, 0, close square bracket. That would be the actual text now it's typing to the screen. It wouldn't know, the compiler wouldn't know to go out and grab the value from that location in our array. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go ahead and run it, Control F5. So here's my console. There's the prompt, enter my first name, enter my phone number, and enter my email address. There's the inputs. Now there's the output, properly concatenated. Hello, Bill, comma, your phone number is blah, 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 comma, your email address is blah, blah, blah. And I guess I could have put a period at the end there. If I wanted to add here one more concatenation, we could go like this and then quote, period, quote, just add the period there at the end. And I wouldn't mark you down if you didn't do that. So that one makes sense to everybody? That's concatenation. Yes. You can do it that way. I don't recommend it. I still think that string interpolation is the way that you want to, what you'll be using most often here for most of your coding. But let's move on to the composite format now. So the way that the composite format works is, instead of inserting your variables using the concatenate operator, you can actually put placeholders into the entire string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this portion here, because what we're going to do is the whole thing now is going to be a string. So I'm just going to get rid of all of that, and then I'll come back and add. So that makes everything a string, right? All the text is inside of an open quote, close quote. So now what we want to do is put placeholders in the string, and then to the right of the string, I'll add a comma. And that's where I'll list the actual names of the variables. In this case, it'll be our array name and then each of the different elements within the array. So however many placeholders I put inside of my string here, I need to have that many variables out to the right of this comma. So let's put in the placeholders and then we'll add the variables out to the right. So right in here, the way you put the placeholders in is using curly braces. And the value that I put in the curly brace represents, and actually let's put the user properties in here to the right, just because it'll be easier for me to reference them to you. So here's going to be our first variable value, our next variable value, then is the second element, and then our third element. So again, I'm after the string, I've added a comma here, and then I've listed each of the variables that I want to draw the values from to be placed into these placeholders that I'm going to be adding in here. So the 0 placeholder, just like any array, That's essentially what we have out to the right here now is an array. We're telling the compiler, hey, here's 3 values. The first value is going to be at the 0 location. The second value is at the 1 location. And the third value is at the 2 location. So when I put the placeholder 0 here, I'm telling the compiler, go grab this first value here and put it in where that placeholder is. So now I'll move over to where it says your phone number is, in the same thing, but now I want to pull in the number 1 variable, which is this one here. And then finally, our address is, in curly braces, the number 2. So that represents our last value down here. So this is called the composite formatting method, where you write out the whole string, and in the string, you add placeholders using curly braces and then numerically representing which variables to put in there. If I wanted to alter this, if I wanted to say hello and then my phone number would be displayed, I put in element 1 there. So now it would actually grab this value and stick it in here instead of the first value. So these numbers actually correspond then, just like our arrays work, they correspond with these elements that are out to the right past the string. So the 0 value is this one, the 1 value is this second one, and the 2 value is that third one there. So just take these values, replace them with wherever the placeholders are listed. That's composite formatting. And then finally, string interpolation. The key here is to begin, or before really the first quote of the string, we want to add a $sign. Or actually, hold on a second. I guess I should run this for you first. So let me save that. Let me run it, Control F5. Just to show you it's all going to work the same. Okay, so same output as before, just different way of representing that output in code. So now we'll do string interpolation. The key to string interpolation is putting that $sign before your opening quote. And the beauty of this is now you don't have to have placeholders and then have corresponding values or variables out here to the right that represent each of the placeholders. You can now just actually, in those curly braces, just stick the actual variable itself. And that's what really makes this so much easier to write and easier to read. So now I'm just saying hello, and then go grab this value. And then your phone number is, I'll get this one, go get that value. You know, we don't have to link it to these variables out to the right here. We can just now put them right in there when we're using that string interpolation operator. So we put that in, then just get rid of all these commas after the string. So you can see it's just one entire string value, and before the opening quote, we've got the string interpolation operator there. So that says, read this as a string, but whenever you hit a curly brace, just locate that particular variable's value and place it in there for us. So a lot easier to read, a lot easier to write. That's why I think it's the preferred method these days. So let's save that. We'll go ahead and run it, Control F5. So first name, still Bill. Phone number 1234567, and my email. And there you go. Again, same output. You know, the user doesn't know that we've changed that underlying code, but from a programmer standpoint, heck of a lot easier to write, heck of a lot easier to read. Now, as I said, and I haven't actually been grading on this for the midterm, but I just mentioned earlier that I'm terrible at putting comments in here, but if you wanted to go ahead and do comments for each of these, I would recommend it. In fact, how about we do this? I'll give you 10 extra points on your score if you put commenting in for each of your blocks of code here. So what's this? This is prompting user for first name input. And what I find is once I've got a structure started that I'm just going to replace values in, I'll just usually copy it, paste it. so I don't have to type it all out again. So I'm just going to put the comments right here before each one I want to comment, and then I'll just go and change it. So this is prompting for the user for phone number input. And you can see too, comments shouldn't be real verbose. You should try and be as succinct as possible, because I don't want to have to read a novel just to figure out what a line of code's doing. So those would be some good examples of comments you can put in there. Well, I just noticed something weird up here. I didn't notice this before. For some reason, it added a using statement that we don't need up there either, which is this security cryptography X509 certificates. I'm not sure how that got in there. You should only have to have the using system because we're using the console object both for read line and write line, and that's we're not even using the array object in here because we're not sorting or anything. So really the console object's the only thing there, and that's available in the system library, so you really shouldn't have any other using directives in there. And apparently there are some copies of this out on the internet, because I've gotten a few in my online class where they've got all kinds of weird code in there. And it's interesting when they copy from the internet how they all post the same errors in the same coding. Do your own work and you'll be much better off for it. It'll make you learn and you'll be able to retain it much better down the road.